In this episode, I'm going to talk about learning objectives and how, if you get rid of them, you'll actually have more impact with your e-learning scenarios.
You're here because you want more engagement, more delight, more fun, more learning. You're hungry for change and willing to take action.
If you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original.
Welcome to the e-learning scenario design podcast with Anna Sabramowitz.
I'm gonna show you how great I am.
Let's take learning to the next level.
Hello. Welcome to another podcast, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. And if you are not, then this is going to make it a whole lot better, because this is a topic that is going to excite you and make you just go right back in there and design more awesome e-learning scenarios. So, learning objectives. I'm thinking I just had a conversation with one of my private clients, and I thought about the fact that the question that he asked me was actually something that I've heard and has been sent to me as a question many times before. And I thought I'd tackle it here because it's an excellent question. And the question is, how do you actually affect behavior change with your e-learning scenarios? How do you do that, right? That's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I thought, why don't I just record a podcast that kind of answers all of those things? Because I think there's definitely something that we've potentially brought over from our academic days and kind of superimposed it in a medium that does not need it, or it's in effect actually muddying up what we're trying to accomplish, which is affect behavior change, have people do things a little bit differently. So the question was, how do you actually affect that change? How do you make people do things differently or behave differently with e-learning scenarios alone? And here's the answer that I will give to you, that I give to all of my private clients who are actually trying to do this. And most of them, this is exactly why they design scenarios, is because they are trying to have people at their workplace do things differently. So skip the learning objectives. Don't even look at them. What instead I want you to ask is, what do your target audience, the people who you are designing these scenarios for, what do they need to believe? What kind of attitude do they need to have to be successful in this role? So you're trying to figure out what is holding them back. What are some beliefs, some attitudes that prevent this person from taking action on the knowledge that is already out there? So let me tell you something that I learned about and from my mom. So my mom worked she ran her own successful business for a long time, but before she ran her own salon, she actually worked at some pretty awesome ritzy salons. And her sales, she worked, it's funny because she actually worked on commission for the sale of the products, but her sales were always very, very low. And one of the things that, if you have a sales force and the sales are low, then what you could assume is that people don't know anything about the products, or they don't know how to share the benefits of those products to the customers, or how to make recommendations based on, especially here, my mom is a skin expert, so how do you make a recommendation when you've given somebody a skin treatment? What are you recommending to them based on your expertise? And so one of the things that you could do is say, okay, we're just going to put together some learning objectives with people will have to know the ingredients of each product, the benefits of each product, and how to use those products. Now, if you actually discussed the products with somebody like my mom, extremely knowledgeable, in fact, she probably, I know this, she would be able to actually put those products together on her own. She knew how to do that. So that wasn't the issue. Knowing when to use the products, knowing who to recommend them to, that was not the issue. This is the issue. My mom believed that asking for a sale was pushy, and she didn't want to be pushy. She didn't want to leave a bad taste in her customer's mouth. So her belief was that asking for a sale was pushy. And she based this belief on the fact that if she had a bad sales experience, or somebody recommended a product to her that she didn't want or need, she basically superimposed that belief onto her work. Another one of her perceptions was that I wouldn't buy something like this because I think it's very expensive, so nobody should ever pay this much for something like a cream. So because I think this is expensive, other people will perceive it that way too. So I won't recommend it to them because I think they can get maybe a better value by buying it online someplace. And then again, one of the things that my mom didn't perceive was maybe the people who are coming in, they're coming in with $5,000 purses. That lady believes that $5,000 is perfectly acceptable to spend on a purse or a pair of shoes. Now, what my mom was doing is she was perceiving that based on her own experience, this lady would think that this cream was expensive, but my mom lived a different reality than her customers. And so she, in essence, took the decision away from them by not offering them that product. So the thing is, if you look at it from this perspective, and this is just one example, scenarios are there not to teach people ingredients lists or how to match benefits to features. That's not necessarily what your biggest challenge is. It's to figure out what the people need to believe in order to be better at their jobs. It's not information. There's tons of information. We're not trying to create new info. What we're trying to do is create a way for somebody to perceive their gap and say, you know what? I actually didn't know this is what people thought, or I didn't see it from this perspective. Now let me seek out the info and then, go to town with learning objectives. But that's when you're actually sharing introductory information with people, not when you're trying to change their beliefs. So I think a lot of times when I look at the work that my clients come in with and they say, okay, this hasn't worked for us, we're not changing behaviors, I will tell them it's because you're now, instead of addressing why people won't apply this information, you're just giving them more information. More information doesn't solve the problem. And in fact, if you really think about it, most of the info that we need is already out there. People have access to it. People have access to it on lynda.com. There's tons of repositories. You have procedures at your company. So it's easy for us to tap into that. What we have to do the little bit of that work with together is figure out, why are people not accessing that info? What's holding them back? What are the gaps? What are the beliefs and the attitudes that prevent them from seeing that there's a different way? And so you have to ask, what do we need, let's say, somebody like my mom to believe to be successful? And that's what you start your scenarios with. So let's say what we have to have our belief is that asking for a sale is actually being very helpful and it's in the best interest of that customer. Because not making the offer, let's say, taking the decision away from the customer you care about, you're not letting them decide, one, how to spend their money. How would you like to not be able to have the ability to choose? And also, they come to see you because you are an expert at something, and for you to, it is your duty for you to give them all the options so they can make a decision. But you are an expert, let's say in skincare, and your job is to give them those recommendations because you know better, and you're also taking the overwhelm of going into a store where they have 100 creams and you've actually touched that person's skin, or you know what they're supposed to be doing to enhance their look. What are you recommending? So those are the things that we need to know up front to design great scenarios, because if we want to affect change, we have to tackle those beliefs first. Now, here's a potential scenario. Let's say for somebody to, like my mom, to experience this would be great. Something like, the client comes in about another month, and my mom happens not to be there. So what happens is she gets let's say a facial with somebody else, and at the end of that facial, somebody else recommends this product, this cream. And this lady says, let me just tell you about this cream. I think it'll be, great for your face. And the lady will say, oh, this is wonderful. Is this a new product? And she'll say, no, it isn't. We've always had it. She goes, oh, well, I wonder how come that other lady didn't recommend it to me, because I didn't realize you had it, and I would have been using it all along. That's just wonderful. Now I don't have to think about trying to find it at the other store. So that probably would have, like, especially for somebody who really cares about what people think and is careful to make sure that the recommendations are right, it just increases their confidence in the fact that sales are now not a bad thing. Sales are something that actually helps people live better lives. So, like I said, information is not lacking. We have tons of info everywhere, right? So save the learning objectives for teaching people about things they don't know about. But if you're trying to change behavior, you have to figure out what those attitudes are, the beliefs that hold people back from taking action, and then that action, the fact that the action is, if they perceive a gap, they're going to go find the info. So just make sure that after you've helped them perceive the gap, that you have the info and it's helpful and ready for them to actually implement. So using scenarios, show them the consequences of those actions. Remember, what you can do with scenarios is, if somebody can't perceive the consequences of their actions because the consequences are far removed, let's say they happen, like, you don't actually see any effects of, let's say, 6 months from now, but scenarios can actually do that. They can compress time and show people what will happen as a result, right? You don't get lung cancer at the first cigarette, but let's say we can show them, 5 years from now what will happen, how their lives will be affected. Maybe that's what you should be doing. So you have to figure out what those gaps are, and then, like I said, give them avenues afterwards when they're ready and fired up, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know this is the way to do it." Give them the ways now, the information, so that they can access it and fill those gaps. So, like most people don't need more info. They just need to have the right beliefs to take action on that information. So I hope that was helpful to you and that you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave me a comment or send me an email at anna@elearnerengaged. And I hope you tune in next time. Take care, my friend. Bye.
You're listening to the E-Learning Scenario Design Podcast with Anna Sabramowitz.